Hey guys, how's it going? This is Waj from the MW Technology channel on YouTube and on instafuse.com, and in this video we're doing a review of the Canon EOS 70D. Now I've had a couple of weeks with the 70D. Overall it's been a really cool and fun experience. I really like this camera overall. I've had a chance to compare it against the older 60D that it'll be replacing, as well as the Nikon D7100, which is kind of its main competitor out there if you're kind of looking into this camera and you're kind of deciding between this or the Nikon cameras, which are kind of the most popular DSLRs out there. I think this camera definitely has some advantages and disadvantages over the Nikon. If you're interested, definitely check out that video. But in this video, we're going to be really talking about my personal user experience on the 70D. Now, I've been a 60D owner currently right now. I've had T2Is and I've experienced 5D Mark IIs and Mark IIIs and a lot of different Canon cameras, as well as I'm a really big fan of Panasonic cameras. I've been an avid GH1 user. I love the GH2 and really want to save up to get a GH3. So I'm really not in any camp in terms of cameras. I love all of them. They all have different features. And so I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible to make my perceptions as broad as possible. So if you're interested in this camera, it's a really kind of straightforward perspective. Now, I had a chance to use this camera really in depth for a couple of weeks now. One of the biggest things I like about the camera is the fact that it is a full-size DSLR. Of course, the build quality and materials is not as high-end as a professional level DSLR such as a 7D or a 5D Mark III. But overall, it's built really well. I do like the fact that it is not as heavy as those other cameras. So it only weighs about, I think, like 755 grams. Of course, the body is polycarbonate plastic, so that's kind of a trade-off in terms of weight. But overall, it's definitely no cheaply made camera. It's pretty well weather sealed as well, so you should feel pretty confident of going outside in kind of almost any condition. Now, of course, when you're holding the 70D in your hand, I think it really has a really nice feel. I feel like if you have really medium-sized hands, you have a great grip on the camera, and it's much more comfortable than your lower-end DSLRs like your T5Is and all your other smaller kind of lower range DSLRs. I think it's definitely a huge improvement if you're used to those styles of cameras. Now, of course, if you're a Nikon shooter or a Panasonic shooter or a Sony, whatever, this camera will feel different from all those different cameras. Ergonomics is sometimes a personal choice on what you've used before, but I think universally Canon is a very comfortable camera to use and it feels very secure in the hand. Now, one of the big features of the 70D that Canon has put on the camera is, of course, that full articulating screen that you saw in the 60D and a lot of different other cameras. But now it has a capacitive touchscreen, much like the T4i and the T5i. And if you use any of those cameras, it's pretty much identical in terms of usability. I really like how it's so direct and simple to use. Very intuitive design as well too. At first you don't think you might need it, but once you start using it, it really feels very easy to use the camera, and it's very natural to just change your shutter speed settings, scroll through your photos and your videos, much like you would do in a smartphone. Now, one of the big things I love about this camera is its new autofocusing system, not only in video, which we'll talk about in a second, but specifically the stills functionality in autofocusing is really quite amazing. It's very similar to your 7D that's been out for quite a while. In fact, it has the same number of autofocusing points of 19, but now they're all cross type, so they're very accurate and very fast in terms of autofocusing. And additionally, Canon has also put in a new button right next to the shutter release, which you can change some of your autofocusing settings, and that's very quick and handy, especially if you're really into still photography and you use a lot of autofocusing. Now, one of the biggest selling features of the 70D and one of the flagship features it has right now currently available and what's being pushed in terms of its marketing is its new autofocusing system for video. Essentially what Canon has done is they've invented a new type of technology which they're calling dual pixel technology, which essentially has two photodiodes that reads light in different wavelengths on each effective pixel. So essentially what you get is kind of a dual pixel for each effective pixel. And what that translates to is a phase detection autofocusing mode in continuous live view. Now, traditionally what you find in most continuous autofocusing systems is something called contrast detection autofocusing. And essentially what that's trying to do is take a look at two dynamically distinct regions and try to find the exact point of where to focus. So if you enable your contrast detection autofocusing in an older camera or in another camera that uses continuous contrast detection mode like the Nikon D70-100, it'll constantly kind of come in and out and change the dynamics of the image to target whatever you want in focus, whether it be your face or really anything else. Now in the 70D, what happens is since you have two photodiodes reading two different wavelengths of light in one effective pixel, is that you have phase detection autofocusing in live view, and it's a continuously operating thing. And additionally, if you have an STM lens from Canon, the operation of this autofocusing system is pretty much absolutely silent. And if you buy the 70D with the kit lens, that is an STM lens, and Canon has over 100 different lenses that they're compatible with, but I've tested out third-party lenses and it works quite well. Just make sure your lens, whatever third-party lens you're using, has quiet motors, either hypersonic, or a lot of different companies call their quiet motors differently, but I have an old Sigma lens that uses a servo motor, and the Canon 50mm f1.8 is also a servo motor, and it's extremely loud. So definitely not recommended for that. But if you turn off, if you don't use the onboard audio, the focusing system is so smooth that it looks like an old camcorder, or even better, somebody actually pulling focus using like a follow focusing system. It really emulates that kind of smooth, gradual autofocusing change very, very well. And I'm really impressed by the Canon's first attempt in autofocusing. And this is really probably one of the best autofocusing systems in continuous video mode. Now the stills capability on the 70D in terms of image quality, as you would expect, is really quite good. The 60D was great at 18 megapixels. They've upped the megapixel count to 20.2 megapixel, and it's 14-bit RAW files, so very good dynamic range overall in the RAW images, and really great skin tones, and a lot of great stills capabilities on this camera in terms of image quality. Now, since this 70D has the new Digic 5 Plus processor, all your low light performance is quite good as well. It's very, very clean all the way up to 6400 ISO, and if you use some of the noise reduction features, it's quite good as well too. But if you don't use it, straight off the bat, unfiltered, the images are very clean at higher ISOs, and it's a little bit better than, I would say, than something like a Nikon D70-100, and certainly better than the older 60D. But again, that's kind of expected since the image processing technology is getting better and better in terms of dealing with less and less light. So you're going to see an improvement from this in the next camera. But overall, very good low light performance. Now, in terms of the video quality itself, you'll be happy to notice that the 70D has a couple of different features. Of course, it can record 1080p at 24 frames per second, 25 frames per second, as well as 30 frames per second. And it can record 720p at up to 60 frames per second, as well as 50 frames per second for all you European and PAL users out there. Now, the 70D has two different formats on how it records video. The first one is an IPB mode, which is an interframe mode, which basically is a more compressed mode where it takes a look at the motion of your footage and see similarities, and if there's redundancies, it can cut off data to save you space. And if you have a lower speed card, it's very good. And if you want to record more on your SD card, that's also great. And as well as a higher level bit rate, which is an all-I. Now, the all-I format will not take away data from similar frames. It will keep its high bit rate fairly consistently, and of course one of the big advantages is going to be a little bit easier to edit with. There's not going to be as compression on it, so it'll have again a little bit more clearer look towards it when it comes to motion specifically, and you can probably do a little bit more stuff in terms of color correction here and there. Not a lot. It's no log file or anything like that, no uncompressed or anything like that. Of course, couple that with a kind of low profile picture style and the all-eye setting, you have a pretty powerful and versatile video camera for certainly the price. Now, one of the modes that I would love to see on pretty much any Canon camera would be a 1080p 60 frames per second mode. Now, obviously, even the almost $15,000 C300 doesn't even have that. Why would this $1,000 camera have this kind of huge feature? Well, I would say that if you take a look at the GH3 and the Sony NEX cameras, they all can shoot 1080p at 60 frames per second. It's kind of interesting to start comparing this camera to other cameras on the market that have this feature. And of course, it's not for everyone. Canon is looking at the mainstream audience that would take a look at this camera and buy it. And most of them probably don't need 60p at 1080. But if they want to be competitive against their competitors out there, it would be nice to see that. Now, another big feature of the 70D is that it now has Wi-Fi built into the camera, which makes it great for reviewing your photos as well as doing some remote shooting stuff. Now, obviously with it being wireless and reliant on the internal antenna of the 70D, the responsiveness is pretty good. It's not too bad. Now, the app that Canon has developed for this wireless shooting isn't as powerful as what you would find on the EOS utility that Canon includes with the camera, which is of course a wired solution, but it's much more powerful than the app that has this wireless Wi-Fi shooting capabilities. Now, of course, this built-in Wi-Fi is definitely going to be really great in the future once we have a little bit more sophisticated apps available in the iOS store and on Android. Now, the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the overall value of the 70D. I think much like everything else we talked about in this video, this is quite subjective to your needs. Many people have different budgets and different functionalities that they're going to use a camera for. So keep that in mind. Don't take any of my advice really seriously. Just take it as an anecdotal kind of piece of information and make your own decisions. Listen to other people, read other reviews, try out the camera yourself is probably the biggest thing and see if it fits your needs. But in terms of cost itself, the 70D retails for about $11.99 for the body only. And if you want the STM kit lens, which is a great option if you're going to do a lot of autofocusing, and it's a great starter lens, it retails for about $15.49 USD. Now, if you live in Canada or other places, the price usually is probably a little bit more expensive. Here in Canada, where I live, it's about $100 more for some reason. But overall, I think it's a pretty good value. It has a lot of different features that people are going to be interested in, and it's very competitive in the market. It has some disadvantages that other cameras certainly have, as we talked about, but I think those advantages definitely go over some of those disadvantages. It makes it pretty worthwhile. Now, of course, value is always a tricky thing. It depends on how much you have to spend and whether you see the value or not. Of course, I'm not going to convince you in any way, shape, or form that this is worth this amount or really any product. But if you're looking for a video camera and this is your first camera, and if you have a limited amount of budget, I think this is a great option if you want to buy brand new. Of course, if you want to buy used, I would highly recommend getting the 60D for like $500 on Craigslist if you can find it for that much. The cameras, in terms of overall functionality, if you don't see the value in this 70D, definitely check out my 70D versus 60D comparison and see whether the 70D is worth it for you. Now, if you're kind of bummed out about some of the disadvantages that this camera has, I would highly recommend that you guys check out my Canon 70D versus the Nikon D7100 comparison. And all these videos will be at the end of this video, and you'll have links to them so you can watch them straight after this. But overall, I think it's a great camera. It has a great value if you're looking into a brand new camera system, and highly recommend it overall if you see the value of it. But other than that, guys, if you like this video, please make sure to give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions at all, I know we talked a lot about in this video about the camera, please make sure to leave it on a comment down below. Let me know if you guys are upgrading to this camera, or if you're interested in this, or if you find it completely waste. I'd love to hear all your thoughts. And lastly, if you like this video, please make sure to visit our instafuse.com article on the review of this product. It'll be kind of a written form of this video, kind of complimentary, and I'll give a little bit more information on my overall thoughts. But again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you later. Take care.